What if I told you that you just inherited the biggest country on Earth, but its economy is completely broken? No modern banks, no ports, no money, just millions of people and endless land that's worth basically nothing. That's exactly what happened to Catherine the Great in 1762, and what she did next is the most insane economic transformation in history. She fought two massive wars to unlock new trade routes. She invented Russia's first paper money. She brought in thousands of foreign experts, and she expanded the empire by millions of square miles. But there's a dark secret behind all of this success, a secret that would eventually destroy everything she built. I'm about to show you the craziest economic turnaround challenge in history. Buckle up, because this is going to be wild. Okay, let's set the scene. It's 1762. Catherine is a German princess who just pulled off one of the boldest power moves in history. She overthrew her own husband, Peter III, in a coup and seized the Russian throne. But here's the thing. Winning the throne was the easy part, because when Catherine looked at what she actually inherited, she realized she was in serious trouble. Russia in 1762 was like inheriting a massive mansion that's falling apart. Sure, it looks impressive from the outside. It's literally the biggest country on Earth, stretching from Europe all the way to the Pacific Ocean. But on the inside, it's a disaster. Let me break down just how bad things were. Problem number one, primitive agriculture. Russian farming was decades behind Western Europe. They were using the same techniques from the Middle Ages. No crop rotation, terrible tools, and harvests that constantly failed. Problem number two, zero industry. While Britain was building factories and steam engines, Russia had almost no manufacturing. Everything had to be imported at massive cost. Problem number three, no access to warm water ports. This is huge. Russia's only major port was Arkhangelsk in the Arctic, which was frozen for half the year. Imagine trying to run a global trading empire when your only shipping port is locked in ice for 6 months. Problem number four, the treasury was broke. Wars under previous rulers had drained the coffers. The government was constantly scrambling for money. Problem number five, no modern financial system, no banks, no paper money, no credit system. The entire economy ran on silver coins that were literally worth more melted down than as currency. Catherine looked at all of this and realized she was sitting on a gold mine of potential. Millions of people, vast forests, rich soil mineral deposits, but none of it was generating wealth because the system was completely broken. So she made a decision. She was going to drag Russia kicking and screaming into the modern age. She was going to turn this sleeping giant into an economic powerhouse. But how do you fix an economy this broken? Well, Catherine had a plan, and it was audacious. Catherine wasn't just some random ruler. She was obsessed with Enlightenment philosophy. She corresponded with Voltaire and Diderot, the biggest thinkers of her age. She read economic treatises. She studied how other countries built wealth. And from all of this study, she developed a three-part master plan to save Russia's economy. Part 1. Unlock new trade routes. Russia needed access to warm water ports to export goods year-round. This meant conquering territory in the south. Part 2. Modernize the internal system. Build banks, create paper money, improve infrastructure, attract foreign expertise. Part 3. Maximize resource extraction. Survey the land, identify valuable resources, and exploit them to the max. Sounds simple, right? Wrong, because each of these steps would require massive amounts of money, political capital, and military force. Let me show you just how crazy this plan really was. Catherine's first move? She's going to start a war. Not just any war, a war against one of the most powerful empires on Earth. Why? To get those warm water ports. But before we get to that, let me explain why ports were so important, because this is the key to understanding Catherine's entire strategy. In the 1700s, global trade was exploding. Countries that controlled shipping routes were getting rich. Britain, France, the Netherlands, they were all making fortunes from maritime trade. Russia had tons of valuable exports: grain, timber, iron, furs, hemp for ship ropes. Western Europe desperately wanted these goods, but Russia couldn't efficiently ship them because its ports were either frozen or located in the wrong places. It's like having a warehouse full of gold bars, but no truck to transport them to buyers. You're sitting on wealth you can't access. So Catherine looked south to the Black Sea. If she could control the Black Sea coast, Russian ships could reach the Mediterranean, and from there, the world. There was just one problem. The Ottoman Empire controlled the entire Black Sea region, and they were not going to give it up without a fight. All right, this is where things get insane. In 1768, just 6 years into her reign, Catherine declares war on the Ottoman Empire. Now, to put this in perspective, the Ottoman Empire had been a dominant power for centuries. They controlled vast territories across 3 continents. They had massive armies. And Russia was still considered a backwards power by most of Europe. This was like a startup challenging Microsoft. But Catherine had been preparing. She'd been modernizing the Russian military, bringing in European advisors, building new ships. And you know what? It worked. The Russian military absolutely dominated. In 1770, the Russian Navy achieved one of the most stunning victories in naval history at the Battle of Chesma. They destroyed the Ottoman fleet. We're talking about complete and total annihilation. Russian armies pushed south, capturing fortress after fortress. By 1774, the Ottomans were begging for peace, and Catherine got exactly what she wanted. The Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca gave Russia access to the Black Sea, the right to build a navy there, control of Crimea, which would become fully Russian in 1783, the right for Russian merchant ships to pass through Ottoman straits into the Mediterranean. This was huge, like civilization-changing huge. But here's the thing. This war cost an absolute fortune. The war drained approximately 47 million rubles from the treasury. That's roughly 500 million in today's money. The government had to print paper money just to cover expenses. Inflation started creeping up. But Catherine believed it was worth it. And initially, she was right. With Black Sea access secured, Russian grain exports exploded. Timber exports soared. The port of Odessa, founded in 1794, became one of the busiest trading hubs in the region. It's like Catherine just unlocked a cheat code in a video game. Suddenly revenue started flooding in. But wait, you think Catherine was done? Oh no, she was just getting started. Because 13 years later, in 1787, she did it again, another war with the Ottomans. Why? Because she wanted to push even further south. More coastline, more ports, more trade access. This second war was even more expensive, another 30 million rubles. But Russia won again, securing even more Black Sea territory. By the 1790s, Catherine had completely transformed Russia's geopolitical position, from a landlocked giant to a major maritime power. But all of this military success came at a massive cost. And I'm not just talking about money. Okay, so Catherine's winning wars and expanding the empire. But she's also burning through money at an insane rate. The treasury is constantly empty. So what does she do? She decides to completely revolutionize Russia's financial system. In 1769, right in the middle of the First Ottoman War, Catherine does something radical. She creates the Assignation Bank, Russia's first real bank. And with it, she introduces paper money for the first time in Russian history, the assignation ruble. Now, this might not sound revolutionary to us, but in 1769, this was cutting edge. Paper money was still relatively new even in Western Europe. The idea was genius. Instead of hauling around heavy silver coins, people could use lightweight paper notes. This made trade faster and more efficient. It also gave the government a way to print money when they needed it, which, let's be honest, was all the time because of these expensive wars. But Catherine didn't stop there. She also created the State Loan Bank in 1786 to provide credit to nobles, established the Copper Bank to issue copper currency, reformed tax collection to be more efficient, started issuing government bonds. She was basically building a modern financial infrastructure from scratch. And here's why this mattered. Banks create economic multipliers. When you have banks, people can borrow money to invest in businesses. Merchants can get credit to buy inventory. Landowners can finance improvements. Without banks, economies stay stuck in a barter mentality where you can only do business with the cash you physically have on hand. Catherine understood that if Russia was going to compete with Western Europe, it needed the same financial tools. But, and this is a big but, there was a dark side to all this financial innovation. Remember how I said Catherine was printing money to pay for wars? Well, printing money causes inflation. By the end of her reign, those assignation rubles that were supposed to be equal to silver rubles, they'd lost about 75% of their value. A paper ruble was worth only 25% of a silver ruble. This hurt ordinary people the most. Their savings evaporated. Prices went up. But the government could pay its debts with cheaper money. It's like Catherine discovered deficit spending and just ran with it. By 1796, Russia's national debt had ballooned to over 200 million rubles. That's over $2 billion in today's money. So yes, Catherine modernized Russia's finances, but she also turned Russia into a debt-fueled economy that was living beyond its means. But Catherine wasn't just fighting wars and printing money. She was also launching a massive internal development campaign. We're talking about a nationwide transformation. Let me show you the scale of what she did. Project number 1, the Great Land Survey. Catherine ordered officials to survey the entire empire and create detailed maps of resources. Forests, minerals, agricultural potential, everything. Why? Because you can't exploit resources if you don't know where they are. It's like playing a strategy game in fog of war. You need to reveal the map first. Project number 2, the German settlement program. This is absolutely wild. Catherine invited thousands of German farmers to settle in the Volga River region. She gave them free land, tax exemptions, religious freedom, and local autonomy. Why Germans? Because German farming techniques were way more advanced than Russian methods. The plan was that these Germans would serve as living examples of modern agriculture, and Russian farmers would learn from them. By the end of her reign, there were over 100 German colonies with 27,000 settlers. They introduced crop rotation, better plows, and new crops. Project number 3, urban expansion. Catherine founded or significantly expanded dozens of cities. Odessa, Sevastopol, Dnipro, then called Yekaterinoslav, and more. She wasn't just building cities randomly. These were strategic economic hubs, port cities, trading centers, administrative capitals. Project number 4, cutting internal tariffs. Before Catherine, different regions of Russia charged tariffs on goods moving between them. It was like having to pay tolls to move products from California to Texas. Catherine said, "This is ridiculous," and eliminated most internal tariffs. Suddenly, goods could flow freely across the empire. Internal trade boomed. Project number 5, attracting foreign experts. Catherine brought in British engineers, German scientists, French architects, Italian artists, the best talent from across Europe. She paid top dollar for these experts, and they helped modernize everything from mining techniques to urban planning. It's like she was recruiting an all-star team to level up her entire civilization. The results? By the 1790s, Russia had over 400 new factories and manufactures, compared to barely 200 in 1762, doubled its urban population, significantly increased grain production, expanded its road network, modernized mining operations in the Urals. Russia was transforming before the world's eyes. But all of this development required one critical ingredient: labor. Tons and tons of cheap labor. And that brings us to the darkest part of Catherine's economic miracle. Okay, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. How did Catherine actually pay for all of this? The wars, the banks, the development projects, the foreign experts? The answer is both simple and horrifying. She squeezed millions of enslaved people called serfs. Let me explain what serfdom was, because this is crucial to understanding both Catherine's success and her ultimate failure. Serfs were peasants who were legally bound to the land they worked. They couldn't leave without their master's permission. They could be bought and sold along with the land. They had almost no legal rights. They weren't technically slaves, but functionally, they were slaves in everything but name. And here's the shocking part. Catherine made serfdom worse. She granted nobles even more power over their serfs. Nobles could now punish serfs however they wanted, including beatings, send serfs to Siberia without trial, sell serfs separately from land, force serfs to work in factories. Why would Catherine, this enlightened ruler who corresponded with Voltaire about freedom and human rights, do something so brutal? The answer is cold, hard economics. Serfs provided free labor for agriculture, the grain exports that made Russia rich, grown by serfs, free labor for factories. Manufacturing was powered by serf workers, a stable tax base. The government taxed serfs through their noble landlords, cheap military recruits. Serfs were drafted into the army for 25-year terms. Serfdom was the foundation of Catherine's entire economic system. Without serf labor, nothing else would have been possible. By 1796, about 50% of Russia's 36 million people were serfs. That's 18 million enslaved people. And unsurprisingly, they were not happy about this. In 1773-1775, Russia experienced the largest peasant rebellion in its history, the Pugachev Rebellion. Over 100,000 serfs rose up against their masters. They burned estates, killed nobles, and nearly toppled the government. Catherine crushed the rebellion with overwhelming military force. The leader, Pugachev, was captured, tortured, and executed. It took years to restore order, but the message was clear. The system was unstable. You can't build a modern economy on the backs of millions of brutally oppressed people without consequences. And here's the ironic part. Serfdom was actually holding back Russian economic development. Why? Because serfs had no money to buy goods, so there was no internal consumer market. Serfs had no incentive to innovate or work efficiently. Talented people were trapped in agricultural labor instead of moving to cities. The system discouraged investment in labor-saving technology. Western Europe was industrializing fast because they had free labor markets. Workers could move to cities, factories could hire whoever they wanted, and productivity soared. Russia? Still stuck with feudal labor relations that would make a medieval lord feel at home. Catherine achieved economic growth despite serfdom, not because of it. She was building a modern economy on a medieval foundation, and that foundation was already starting to crack. Before we get to the final score, there's one more major move we need to talk about: Catherine's partition of Poland. Between 1772 and 1795, Catherine, along with Prussia and Austria, literally erased Poland from the map. They carved it up into pieces and absorbed it into their empires. Russia took the biggest share, millions of square miles of territory and millions of new subjects. Now, this was obviously a brutal geopolitical move, but it was also an economic strategy. Poland brought millions of new taxpayers, vast agricultural land, important cities like Vilnius and parts of Warsaw's region, control of crucial trade routes. It's like Catherine added a whole new expansion pack to her empire. More resources, more labor, more revenue. But it also added more problems, more people to govern, more religious diversity, lots of Catholics and Jews, more potential unrest. Still, from a pure balance sheet perspective, the Polish partitions added enormous value to the Russian Empire. All right, let's tally up the final score. After 34 years of rule, what did Catherine actually achieve? The wins: expanded Russia's territory by 200,000 square miles, gained access to the Black Sea, opening massive trade routes, increased grain exports by over 400%, created Russia's first modern banking system, founded dozens of new cities, attracted thousands of foreign settlers and experts, doubled the number of factories, turned Russia into a recognized great power, increased the population from 20 million to 36 million. By almost every metric, Catherine succeeded. She took a stagnant, isolated economy and turned it into a major player on the world stage. But the losses: created massive national debt, over 200 million rubles, caused significant inflation by printing money, strengthened serfdom, enslaving millions more people, built the economy on an unsustainable foundation, created huge wealth inequality, left Russia dependent on resource exports, failed to industrialize like Western Europe. Catherine's economic transformation was real. Russia genuinely became stronger and wealthier. But she achieved it through methods that were morally bankrupt and economically unsustainable. She solved the immediate crisis. Russia was no longer backwards and isolated, but she created future crises: debt, inflation, social instability, and an economy that couldn't evolve. It's like she won the battle but set Russia up to lose the war. Just 60 years after her death, Russia's serf-based economy would be so broken that they'd have to abolish serfdom in 1861. And even then, they'd struggle to catch up with the West. Catherine the Great achieved an incredible economic turnaround, but she did it by doubling down on the very system that would eventually doom Russia to decades of upheaval. The ultimate economic challenge? It wasn't just won or lost, it was postponed. So that's the story of Catherine the Great's insane economic makeover. She fought wars, printed money, built cities, and enslaved millions, all to transform Russia into a great power. What did you think? Was Catherine a genius economist, or did she just kick the problems down the road? Let me know in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe for more insane history deep dives, and I'll see you in the next one.